Hello and welcome to the editorial analysis of the Hindu. Today we shall be discussing the editorial of the 22nd of August. So coming to the first article, the risks of legalizing cannabis. This is an important article. It is a social issue. It is also an ethical issue. So indeed a relevant one. Now the context here is that there is a question being raised. There are several demands that cannabis is what should be legalized in India also. This is actually a global demand. In many countries it is being seen that these kind of movements are what are there in news for legalizing cannabis. And so a similar demand is what has come to India also. Now for those of you who do not know what cannabis is, basically if you have heard the local names for this is bhang, charas, ganja, all of that is what is cannabis, because this is the name of the plant, the family of the plants from which these products are derived. So that is what cannabis is. Now coming to the analysis, first and foremost you should know something of some basics about the idea of marijuana itself. Now marijuana is basically a product that comes from the plant Cannabis sativa. So this is the name of the plant, and when this plant is what is dried, either any part of that plant, either the stem, the leaf, if that is what is dried and then consumed, then that is what is known as marijuana. This has a product which is delta 9. It is this product within marijuana, the product delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol. So that is what is the name, tetrahydrocannabinol. This is the chemical compound in this particular product. That is what is considered illegal, and in many states. However, in India as of now this is what is illegal, but some states in India have legalized it primarily for usage in the medical industry. So this is what is the important thing, some basics about marijuana that you should know. This has a mention in Sushrita Samhita also. This has been talked about as an important ingredient for treatment, and that is why it has a mention in Sushrita Samhita. So that is again something that is important in the context of marijuana. So these are some basics. Next, what you need to know about is the legal aspect. It is the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act, the NDPS Act of the year 1985. Under this particular act, all of the products, all of the cannabis related products are what are banned in India except for bhang. Bhang has religious values on the festival of Shivratri. This is what is consumed by the people, and it is considered as a product that is related to Lord Shiva, and in that particular context this is what for religious reasons is not banned in India. Otherwise all cannabis related products are what are banned under the NDPS Act. So the act itself is important, the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act. So this is important. Now the issue that is at hand is about the pros and cons for legalizing cannabis. There are several pros for legalizing cannabis, there are several cons for it. Several pros are that first and foremost this will be acting as a source of income for farmers. Farmers can grow marijuana as well as Cannabis sativa and they can sell it. So for farmers this will be a source of income. Also this is what is used in several industries. It has several medicinal uses, I have told you. Also what is important is that in many countries, for example in US also now this has been legalized. So if other countries are legalizing it, why shouldn't India legalize it? And whenever anything is not legal, it doesn't mean that drug issue or drug trafficking in India is not there. It is there. We all know that. What happens is that if this will be legalized, then at least regulation on this will be better. When this is not legalized, this industry entirely goes underground, and that is what has often happened on banning of liquor also. We have seen in the case of Bihar. So that is one challenge that is there in the context of not legalizing cannabis. So the pros are what I have discussed. Now coming to the cons of legalizing cannabis. Now basically there are several cons. This is what is going to result in increased crimes. How this will lead to increased crimes? When people will be consuming something that is not going to ensure that they are in a stable situation, they might act in a not peaceful state of mind, and that might lead to increase in the crime. Also this will lead to health issues just like tobacco and alcohol. Also this is what is a problem to countries like India, where education is what is very low. So what happens is that because of illiteracy in our country, it might be easy to woo away the people who are more vulnerable and then ensuring that they get addicted to these kind of products. So in that scenario it is the responsibility of the government to protect the people, and that is why this is not advisable to legalize marijuana in India. So that is an important analysis. Now some myths are what the editorial is talking about, that there are some myths that are associated with marijuana. or for that matter cannabis. If I'm using the word marijuana or cannabis, please don't get confused, it means one and the same thing. Now the myth is that this is what is harmless. That is one myth, because this has been talked about in our scriptures. It is something that has been used for very long. This is what is being used from historic times. So in that context it is said that sometimes it is believed that this is what is harmless, but that is not the case. There is scientific evidence that this has impacts on human memory. It impacts coordination skills, because of which driving is what gets impacted, just like alcohol. So these are some negative impacts. It might also lead to addiction. It might also lead to schizophrenia, depression, anxiety. So these are some harmful effects of it. Also, what is important here is that if one is consuming this particular product in developmental or formative years, for example, the youth is going to consume it, then this often retards or affects the brain developmental processes. So that is again a harmful impact of the marijuana, and that is one of the myths that is associated with it. Next, what is very important is that if this is what is legalized, then that is going to follow with commercialization. What we mean by commercialization is that once smoking was what was legalized, it got commercialized. Advertisement of smoking is what started happening. Even alcohol, for that matter, if you see, alcohol even today is advertised on television. It is no secret that these companies are advertising their names in the name of music labels or in the name of drinking water. So all of those inherent process of commercialization is what is going to follow marijuana, or for that matter cannabis. This is what has happened in foreign countries also. For example, in those countries, these products are being sold by them as several easily over-the-counter products like ice creams and all of that. So these are the processes of commercialization which happened to the tobacco industry, happened in alcohol through aggressive advertisements, and this might even happen to cannabis. So that is what has been talked about, and this might have some irreversible damage. For example, if commercialization takes place and if there are deaths that are caused because of that, of the consuming cannabis, then this is what is irreversible. This is what cannot be corrected. So that is what has been highlighted. Another important analysis is with regards to the tobacco companies itself. Now many tobacco companies are trying to enter into the cannabis business or the marijuana industry. For example, Marlboro, which is a famous cigarette brand, has invested thousands of dollars in the cannabis industry, and this is why it is becoming even more threatening, because these are the companies which have the skill. These companies already know how to lobby. These companies know how to commercialize their products, how to advertise them. So it is being feared that these companies entering into the commercialization of marijuana might popularize it. So that is again a fear that has been raised. Some suggestions in the end are what the editorial is offering, that if India has to legalize it, first and foremost there is a case for not legalizing it. But yes, if India comes to the pressure and it does legalize it, then it should ensure that even if it is legalized, it is not commercialized. Also, it should protect the youth as well as the vulnerable, like the illiterate. Also, de-addiction treatments are what India should set up. De-addiction centers is what India should provide. So these are some steps, precautionary steps that India will have to take if in any case it legalizes cannabis. So indeed, a very important article. These kind of issues are what even ethics paper asks about free will. It is your own choice if you wish to consume any product like cannabis. Should you be allowed or you should not be allowed? How much should the government interfere on those particular cases? These topics are relevant for ethics also. So that is where the relevance is. Indeed an important article. Coming to the next article, content management. Now the context here is that recently there is a case in the context of which questions are being raised about social media content management. Now basically what happens here is, what has been discussed is that suppose a post is what is made on social media, and this post was targeting a particular caste, it was targeting a particular religion. Then what happens is that this one post gets viral immediately, and this gets spread so fast that it becomes difficult to identify the source of this particular post. Often even if the source is what is traced, it cannot be traced properly, because often these are hoax accounts, these are hacked accounts. So those issues are what keep developing time and again, and in this particular context the government wants to ensure that some regulation is there. So the first issue is that of anonymity. As I just discussed, it is difficult to trace the source. So this is what was a demand that government was making from these companies. For example, Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, all of these companies, it's social media platforms. The government was requesting that these companies should provide the information as to who has released the post. But these companies refused doing that. They said that this was going to be an infringement on the privacy of their users, and they will not be able to cooperate in this end. And as a result of which, the Tamil Nadu government filed a case in the Madras High Court, and there this matter was what was being discussed. and it was proposed by the Tamil Nadu government that these social media accounts should be linked with Aadhaar. And this is the most important analysis. You can be asked that should Aadhaar seeding be done of social media accounts? So that could be one analysis that becomes important, because this is what is in news also. Now basically here what was analyzed by the court is that first and foremost the Supreme Court in its judgment on Aadhaar had said that this is what could be used for only subsidies as well as welfare schemes. So Aadhaar itself cannot be used for linking with social media accounts. Another issue is that if Aadhaar data is what becomes available to these platforms, then this is going to be a large amount of data that will be present with these platforms like WhatsApp and Facebook, and this could be misused. So this is again one concern, because of which Aadhaar should not be linked to social media accounts. So that is one important analysis. Another important analysis is with regards to the Puttaswamy judgment. We all know that this is a landmark judgment of the Supreme Court, where right to privacy is what has been declared as a fundamental right. So in this particular context also, it is important that the privacy of the people or the users of social media is what is protected, but definitely some degree of constraint and some degree of restriction has to be ensured on social media also. And for that particular reason, now the matter is what will be examined by the Supreme Court, and that is why this article has also come. Let us see what does happen. As of now, a number of issues are developing. For example, some aggressive content is what is being circulated on social media. Child pornography is what is being circulated on social media. So all of these issues are what are there in news, and let us see what will be the judgment of the Supreme Court. So this is important, but primarily the linking of Aadhaar to social media account is what is very, very important in this particular article. So that is the relevance here. Coming to the next article, sacrificing liberty for national security. Now the context of this article is with regards to the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. Now it was this act which has now been amended. This was an act of 1967, and now some amendments have taken place. The act is rather passed by the parliament. So we will study what was the previous Unlawful Activities Prevention Act and what are the amendments that have taken place. The first and foremost, we should know about the old law in the year 1967. Why did this law actually come into being? There were many reasons at that point of time because of which the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act came into being. First and foremost was that 1962 war with China had just taken place, and during this war it was seen that many people from India were supporting China. There were communist parties in India who had at that point of time supported China. So that was one issue that was there. Then in the year 1966, what happened is that some Hindu sadhus were objecting and they were fighting against cow slaughter. So these were again some sectionist tendencies that were developing in India. So as a result of which, because of these several tendencies in India, the government decided that a law was what was needed, and then came the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, which declared that any tendency which favored or which focused upon secession from India was to be considered as an unlawful activity. If any activity was to create disruption in the sovereignty as well as the territorial integrity of India, then that was under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. Also in the year 2004, an amendment was made, and any terrorist activity against the country was also to be considered as an Unlawful Activity Prevention Act. This you should know was primarily because the draconian law TADA was what was repealed in the year 2004, and after that it was these terrorist activities that came under the UAPA. So these are the basics of the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. And under this particular act, organizations like the LTTE, we all know about LTTE in Sri Lanka, Khalistan for that matter. Khalistan was an organization that asked for separating Punjab from India. The Hizbul Mujahideen, all of these organizations are what are banned in India under the UAPA. So this is the basics about the UAPA that you should know. Now what is important is that you should know about the amendments that have taken place. The first amendment is that previously it was the center government which was tagging a particular organization as an unlawful activity, as a terrorist organization, and an activity under the UAPA was what was being tagged by the center government. But now, not only the organization, an individual can also be called as a terrorist under the UAPA, and this is what is the major criticism that is coming in the way of UAPA amendments. We will see this in a little bit more detail, but you should know about some other amendments. The second amendment is that till the time the investigation was what was being done by the state government at that point of time, if the terrorist related properties were what were to be seized, then permission was what was required from the Director General of Police. But now, if the investigation is what is being carried out by the body, that is the National Intelligence Agency, then a similar request or similar permission is what will be given by the new Director General of the NIA. So the Director General of the NIA will give the permission for seizing property. So that is one amendment. Also, previously, if the state government was carrying out an investigation under the UAPA, then the minimum rank of officers who would carry out the investigation was a DSP or an Assistant Commissioner. But now what has happened is that if it is going to be taking place, if an investigation will be under National Investigation Agency, then the rank will be an inspector and above. So this will be the rank which will carry out the investigation. So these are the amendments which have taken place. Now next, what is important is about the terrorist tag. Now basically the most important criticism that is coming in the way of the UAPA amendments is the fact that now even an individual can be tagged as a terrorist. So this is what is being discussed here. Now if that is the case, then what is going to happen is, first and foremost, the issue is that previously if an organization was being declared as a terrorist, there was less amount of damage to an organization. But the stigma and the damage to an individual is much more as compared to an organization, and therefore expecting responsibility from the government in doing this is what is bleak. So that is one issue that is emerging. Also, the fundamental rights that are given to individuals and not to organizations. So every individual has a fundamental right to life and liberty, and under this right to life and liberty, it will be very difficult to tag an individual as a terrorist. So how can a government do that? That is another issue, that it might impact or impinge upon the fundamental rights of citizens. That's an issue. Another issue is that it is the central government which will do that, without the fact that person might not be declared guilty by the judiciary. So how is it that the executive can go ahead and tag a person or give a judgment on a person before that person has been convicted by the judiciary? That is another question that is being raised here. So these are some issues. Another issue is with regards to the rules for declaring a person as a terrorist. There is no definition as to what will be the criteria, what a person must have done because of which he will be tagged as a terrorist. This area is what has not been discussed in the amendment, which leaves it open-ended. So any person, even if a person is posting on social media of a particular, maybe a particular post which is saving Pakistan for that matter, in that scenario also the government can say that this person is a terrorist because the rules are not well defined. So all of this is what is raising challenges here. You have to understand that the rights of the citizens are what are supreme. No government should interfere or impinge on the rights, because power is something that corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And in that, to protect from these kind of corruptions, our rights are what are very, very sacred. And if the government is impinging or interfering in our rights, it is something that is unacceptable. So clearly this amendment by the UAPA is what cannot be accepted, and that is what has been talked. The benefit of this is only one, that what was happening was that even if an organization was declared as terrorist, the person would change his organization, he would make a new organization, and then he would continue the same activities. So this is definitely one loophole, but for this the government should have come up with some other method rather than tagging an individual as a terrorist. So that is what is again something important. Also, the criminal system in India is reformative. It is not something that holds a prejudice against a person for life. So that in that particular context also, this is not something that can be appreciated. So indeed important article, UAPA, very, very important amendment, and laws this year very, very important. So this primarily becomes important from the context of General Studies paper 2, and that is where you have to prepare this particular article. So that is where the relevance is. So that's about this particular article, and that's about our discussion. I thank you all for watching the video.